There's a few people joining as I speak, so we have started the recording. We might kick off now, and if there's any latecomers, they can keep up along the way. So I'll hand over to, we've got our chairs with us today, Joe, Abby and Peter, who most of you will know through the industry. I'll just hand over to Joe to get us started.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, so I'll start off with the acknowledgement. Powering Skills acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. And for me and Brett, I think only the two of us, perhaps a couple of other people, joining from Darwin today, it's Larrakia country and people for us. And me again. So just start off with welcome and introductions. So thanks very much for taking the time out of your day to join us. Introductions, quick check. Have we got any new people that have not been to one of our meetings before? If you're needing an introduction or you'd like to introduce yourself, just put your hand up, yell out. If not, we'll move on. So today's agenda, first up, we're going to do a EE review.
Just had Mitchell pop up his hand, Joe.
Oh, okay, sorry, I can't see that. Go, Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Yeah, just thought I'd introduce myself, Mitch Coppock, transmission lines trainer, Transgrid. This first sort of tag I've been involved with.
Excellent,
right.
Thanks,
Mitchell.
Yeah, welcome. So we'll have a UEE review update from Brett. Then we'll go through training package projects updates. So the remote, very remote, I'll run through, and then Pete will run through the UET cross unit group that met for the first time last week. We'll then have an update on research and policy from Pete. Matters for discussion will be led by Brett. Pete and I'll probably jump in and a bit there because there's a fair bit to look at. And then we'll move on through to open floor questions and closing the meeting out. So any questions on agenda? No? Okay,
Thanks,
so
Joe.
over to you, Brett. Yeah.
Cheers, Joe. Thank you. And look, well, I know it's a UET UEP group, and I know how much you love talking about UEE because it tends to dominate the market, but just thought we'd give you a quick update on where we're, as you know, there is flow-on effects to the UET and UEP training packages from units that are imported from the UEE. So just an update on how we're tracking with that project. And you'll see the graph there. So the dark blue in progress, lots of stuff in progress. The light blue is deleted, and then the ochre, I think we call that, is a superseded. So you can see the superseded and in progress pretty much align because they're units that a lot of those units are being superseded, updated to new versions, and then there's some deleted amongst that. And then there's a few that we are yet to start. So we are saying we're on track at the moment. So hopefully still looking to get those out for public consultation, official public and government consultation by the end of the year, and in an extended period for that because of the size of the project. Any questions around the UEE before we move on, and some of the units that might be of interest to you that are in your training package imported? Happy to take them now, or we'll keep going. No, we'll move on. So we'll throw back to Joe to update the group on the remote and very remote training package project that we're doing at the moment.
Thanks, Brett. So yeah, we've pretty met quite a few times now, and so there's several draft units that require revision to ensure they reflect the content and intent of existing units. The committee's agreed to refine unit content before confirming prerequisite requirements. So do that in the secondary stage. Discussions have focused on updating terminology to better reflect the qualifications application in that very remote communities environment. Feedback was provided on unit content relating to remote power generation systems, maintenance activities, safety requirements, isolation procedures, and emerging technologies. And there's some ongoing conversations with Western Australian regulators to ensure relevance and application to very remote communities over there. Next steps, the revised units are ready to be uploaded or will be uploaded for stakeholder review. The tech committee members continue to provide feedback on the units and the development of the qualification. So we'll continue to work through the qualification and its units ahead of broader stakeholder consultation. I'm not sure if there's some other people who have been attending or part of that committee that had anything else that they wanted to say at this point or add. Not sure. I can't see all the people who are. I'm not sure if we've got the Shanes or someone from Power and Water.
No. Troy's here, but I guess just from
Troy.
my perspective, Joe, we are working closely with both Horizon Power and ESS, the RDO, that have done training previously in the Cert 3 qual. We've been concentrating in this group on the Cert 3, moving into the Cert 2 space very shortly. So we're working closely with those stakeholders outside of the technical committee at the moment to take some stuff back to the technical committee as they've delivered those existing units. So we're working on the drafting with them, but then that'll go back through the full tech committee. And
Thanks,
then Pete's got a bit of an update in a minute on how we're treating the common units.
Now Troy's got his hand up, I think, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, just an update on our discussions with the WA regulator as well. We have a meeting scheduled with them for the 1st of September. That's Horizon Building and Energy and ourselves. So we're trying to get that sorted before our next tech committee meeting, and hopefully have everybody happy.
Right. That's good news, Troy.
Excellent. That's good news. Thank you. And over to you, Pete.
All right. So out of that remote group, it's been identified there's the UET cross qualification SME group has been formed and met for the first time last week. And it's been established to bring SMEs together to look at the units of competencies shared across the UET ESI quals. So I call them the base level units, and rather than the remote people writing that unit, that it is more people from across all the quals to make sure that they can get contextualized and covered by all the qualifications that they sit in. So the ways of the working have been confirmed, including meeting cadence, decision making in the pre-read arrangements, and 3 draft units have now been tabled for the initial feedback on a SharePoint for that group, and they are going to meet monthly between now and Christmas and hopefully have, I think it was 7 units, Brett, in total for it to be looked at and reviewed, which will then sit back into the remote, as well as the progression for when the UET review comes into play as well, which Brett will talk about shortly. So the group's a range of subject matter experts that have been involved before with unit reviews and writing of units. So it gives a good broad breadth of the industry across Australia that will have feedback and input into those units.
Thanks, Pete. And yeah, just before I hand over to Pete Adams, it was just really that because we have the full UET review, which I'll talk to shortly, we didn't want to develop units just with the very remote group that were going to be common to that and then have those units updated again so we wanted that broader SME input into those common units as Pete called them the sort of the foundation type units. So, but I'll hand over to Pete Adams now for a bit of an update from our research and policy team.
Hey everyone, how are you all today? It's great to have a bit of a chat. So this is a new section that we've added to the tags. So really keen on feedback. I'll give you a quick rundown of some things that have been going across the country in terms of some of the policy spaces. I'll also give you a bit of an insight into what's been happening from PSO in terms of some of the research products that we've been putting out for anyone who might be interested. Run this to about 5 minutes, so it should be fairly quick, but if you do have any questions or want further information, please don't hesitate to reach out. So you can see there, ongoing, there's been no real different to usual. There's been a range of ongoing policy developments that have been going on in this space. AEMO's 2026 Integrated Systems Plan has been released, some really interesting insights there. So when we look at that, we can see that the transmission network needs to be expanded by about 1/7, which equals around 6,000 kilometres of new transmission required by 2050 under the step change scenario. So pretty significant there, and about a 14% extension of the current 44,000 kilometre network, and around 3,500 kilometres of that is from already committed or anticipated projects that are underway for delivery. So some significant activity there. In terms of the generation side of things, 2/3 of the remaining coal fleet capacity projected to retire by 2035, with the optimal development path outlined in the ISP, outlining a required 117 gigawatts of renewables to replace that coal and to meet rising demand. So again, really significant. Utility scale solar and wind would increase from its current 23 gigawatt capacity to reach 61 gigawatts by 2030, and then almost double by 2050. So some significant scale of change there. When we look at, a lot of that activity being covered by the capacity investment scheme, a bit of an update on that, rounds 5 to 8 have been successfully tendered through 2026 to date, with about 40 projects encompassed within that, over 13 gigawatts of generation and a significant volume of battery storage also included. I'll drop some details on what they were in the chat in a minute. Within the Victorian res zone, the Victorian government declared 5 new renewable energy zones, or 5 zones, for Victoria in May of this year. And they're also working on their 2027 Victorian transmission plan, which will take a 25-year view of the state's transmission, renewable energy generation and storage needs. So consultation going on that at the moment for anyone who might be interested. A lot of other activity. The WA 2026 state budget is establishing a $1.4 billion clean energy fund. Marinus Link obviously shifting ahead at quite a rate in Tasmania, and Copper String in Queensland still shifting along well as well. So very quick update there. We'll go through to the research products. So just to give you a bit of an idea of both what's recently been released and what's coming down the pipeline. 3 products that we've recently released that you might find interesting. We released an electrician workforce capacity study. This really looked at the growth we need to see in the energy workforce, and really started to narrow in on electricians as an example of how we might unlock some of the latent capacity to achieve that growth, and if that was achievable. I'll put the link for that in the chat, but it's a really interesting study released in the last 2 weeks from PSO, and certainly has a lot of policy implications for us going forward that we'll be able to advocate for to try to drive some of that growth that we need to see. Earlier this year, we put out a paper on skills and productivity, and it really looked at how the productivity dynamic was impacting the energy sector and utilities in particular. and you know how the skills and the capability growth was feeding into productivity, and where the utility sector sat within the scale of productivity growth or lack thereof. So again, a really interesting report that will really help us to develop policy recommendations for government, but also has some critical insights in there regarding you know, growing the capability of the workforce and how important that is, and how we might be able to grow productivity to lessen the strain on the you know, overall capacity of workforce we need as well. So again, another really important piece. If you've got any interest in that space, I'll drop the link in the chat in a minute. The final one that we've again released in the last month was on Foundations for Literacy and Numeracy, which looked at the dynamic between the secondary school curriculum and what's really required for success within energy apprenticeships, and how those two interplay. So that's what's come out over the last few months. Coming up over the next 6 months, we've got a targeted workforce update. This is a smaller version of our workforce plan, which really takes a look at updating key data and key numbers about the workforce, looking at wrapping up some of the challenges and opportunities that have been emerging, as well as providing a view on what PSO's been doing over the last year as it relates to our last workforce plan, what might have changed, and the impact of some of the work that we've been undertaking. We'll have a small briefing come out on apprentice poaching and the prevalence of apprentice poaching, which is perceived to be a really concerning issue by industry. And so we've taken a really deep dive into the data that sits behind that and able to show where that is or isn't occurring and the impacts that might be having. We've got an updated policy paper that's due to come out in around October that will use those previous bits of evidence to really make some strong policy recommendations to government to help drive some of that change that we need to see across those key areas, particularly this year in relation to capacity growth, which we're seeing as probably one of the strongest emerging issues that the industry is facing. And finally, one that looks at the impact of data centers and AI on our workforce and our workforce needs. So you can see the timelines sort of for those future releases. They're approximate coming out, apart from the targeted workforce update, which is out in the next 2 weeks. So please keep an eye out for those. And we always welcome discussion on those and ideas on, you know, how we can strengthen them, other research, things that you might like to point out, or topics for future exploration. Again, always welcomed. Thank you very much for your time. That's it from me. I'll pass back.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
If anyone has got any questions along the way, just pop your hand up, your virtual hand, be great. Or if you don't want to speak on the mic, or you've got sound issues, you can pop any questions in the chat as well. So move on to matters for discussion, and the first one is around and briefly mentioned before, the UET and UEP full training package review project submission. So that has been approved for funding and is basically underway. Some initial scoping, a bit of desktop analysis around what's existing, and you can see down the bottom of that slide, UEP, we're talking 9 qualifications. This is existing, 7 skill sets and 209 units, and UET 11 qualifications, 2 skill sets and 164 units. What that looks like at the end of that product review, it remains to be seen, and we're going to have a fair bit of the meeting dedicated at the back end to talking through your views around the current training package, gaps, etc., things you'd like to see changed, or things that need to come in, things that maybe need to go out, you know, use of skill sets, etc. All that is going to be open for discussion. So, and we're also commencing basically from now through till the end of the year, before we actually start drafting any training products, set up the tech committee, etc. We will be doing stakeholder engagement, which Lara will talk to shortly, but we'll just have a look at the timeline first. So yeah, that initial desktop analysis over this sort of next 5-6 months period, we've already started doing some of that. The stakeholder engagement, which Lara will speak to shortly. And then from January next year, we will start product development. So we'll be setting up a technical committee by about January. We'll probably be calling for expressions of interest in that towards the end of the year. I think we've got one more tag in November, so we'll have a firm sort of date for you there when and how you'd be able to apply if you're interested in being part of the technical committee, with the aim to be then that drafting over that sort of 7-8 month period to be ready for public consultation by around mid-October, out for consultation for about a month or so, 5 weeks, and then finalisation and submission to JUA, etc. State senior responsible officers from the states as all part of that process. If you're bored and want to read the training package organisational framework, you can, but we have covered that in before in tag sessions, so we won't go back down that road. So I'd just like to introduce Lara now, who's our and just on the cadence that she is about 6 or 7 days into the job, I think, as our Director of Industry Engagement, just to talk you through this sort of evidence gathering as the first part of the project through our industry engagement team. Over to you, Lara.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. My name is Lara Lavers. Like Brett said, I am this is actually day 8 in the seat. So thanks for having me here. What I hope to do here is just provide some context around how we go about gathering the evidence base for informing the training package review. The key thing I think that's really critical to remember is, first of all, the stakeholder engagement component. We have a window that we've dedicated for formally capturing that data, but stakeholder engagement is something we do as core business, so that all of that insight and intel that is provided through our engagement with you guys and others feeds into that process for informing the training package reviews. And the other thing is really that in reviewing these training packages, not only are we looking at what businesses and employers and the system needs now, but what is it likely to look like in a few years from here, because we want these to be as helpful as possible in the years ahead, in line with our remit. So doing that requires a bit of a process for gathering that data and evidence, and this just gives a little bit of a flavour to how we do that. So at the top, our objective really is about getting a really clear understanding from lots of different sources of data and qualitative information as well around what the training requirements are to equip workers with what they need for success and to meet the future needs of employers in the industry. From there, we build out a bit of an evidence base with a number of different categories of data. So a lot of quantitative data, as well as a lot of feedback that's given from our stakeholders throughout the process, as well as during our engagement windows. And then that is sort of collated into sort of useful insights that the training and package development team can then translate into the design of the packages, so identifying capability gaps and testing that against the existing packages. So you'll hear more about this over the next few months as we start the formal engagement process on these packages. But if you did have any questions about how that process can be improved, we'd love to hear them. So feel free to put your hand up or reach out. That's
Thanks,
it from me.
Lara. Thank you, Lara. And no doubt quite a few people in this room will be hearing from Lara and her team there's quite a few of the team online today as well, over the next couple of months as we build that evidence portfolio. So I might hand over and I might dob you in to start this one off, Joe. We wanted to start with UEP because we realise as much as this group gets frustrated about UEE dominating sometimes, UET probably is going to dominate this conversation. So we thought we'd start off with UEP, and we've just got some prompt cards there on the thing. But yeah, Joe, if you wanted to sort of see if we can tease some info out of the group.
Yeah, so can we just get a little bit of hands, perhaps virtual hands? How many people sort of have an interest or are working in and around the UEP training package? Oh, we've got a little bit. We've got one. Have we got one person? Who's Ben? Great,
Yeah.
Ben. Thank you. So it might be you and me, Ben. I know, too, and Peter.
Yep.
Excellent. That's good to know. Thank you. So, and Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. So the questions that this is all about, just prompting some initial discussions. So, Peter's already got his hand up. Is that with a question or is that with the expression of like you're in the generation? No, that's what it was. Okay. So the questions we're sort of wanting to pose to you all is what are the skills and knowledge gaps in the generation sector? Are you seeing any new emerging roles that aren't really covered off in the current qualification frameworks, and also any sort of that's on offer? I guess a lot of us will start thinking about when. Should we be putting out some surveys to start the conversation? What's people's appetite about responding to some surveys? Would be good to get a view on what technology changes people are seeing in the industry and how that also impacts on training package structure and content. And be real, and just to where Lara's just spoken, it would be really good to get a call out on who you think we should actually be talking to, any peak bodies or organisations in the generation field. And I think we already talked about the emerging technology, but yeah, so anyway, the floor's open there. Those question bases or any other sorts of things that you would like to discuss. I guess the one thing I can sort of put out from a RTO point of view is the diploma of generation. There doesn't seem, whilst we do a lot of non-accredited training, for some reason we don't see a lot of people utilising the full qualification. So I guess be interested to understand what needs to change to make attaining the qualification or the units of competence of value, both to students and employers. I guess that's one thing I'd like to tease out of the process.
Yeah, and just from our perspective, PSO's perspective, Joe, we've definitely found that it does seem to be underutilised, particularly for full qualifications. Some units cherry-picked out, so that potentially is their skill sets that need to be done.
Probably switching.
And also that non-accredited people basically using the units but not actually enrolling in them. So a couple of people who put their hand up, not sure if you're from RDOs or industry, whether what you've found with your training in the UET space would be great. And another point, I guess, to raise here around the work we've done in renewables in the UAE, around solar and battery, it is really in the UAE qualification, it is really concentrated at that domestic rooftop solar level. So there is a bit of an identified gap from us, and we think it sits in UEP because it's a generation package around large scale solar, large scale battery, etc. And there's really nothing on the training in the training package at the moment. So
I think that's the thing, isn't it? That the large scale, so you wind, solar, and because there is definitely a gap there for.
Yep. Stephen's got his hand up. Steve Harrison. Can't hear you, Stephen, if you're talking.
No, not sure. The hand's gone down also on the
Okay.
speakers.
Yeah.
Maybe put it in the chat. Just
Yeah, happy.
Stephen, if you want to just put in the chat whether or not you are actually wanting to.
And probably the shortage of hands that went up in the UET space, and the quietness in the group, we're very aware that we're going to have to really target in UEP stakeholders, and even to get a good cross-section tech committee. So that's probably a good thing we've got out of this silence. So we can come back if some UEP stuff comes up. The conversation's not locked in, but Sarah?
So I was just going to say we've already identified the right people for the UET UEP SME or TC. So there is we do have those people that will be available for that next year when it really kicks off.
That's great.
That's good. Thanks, sir.
We might flick over to the UET slide and pretty much. Steve's got his hand up again. Go for it, Stephen.
Something's not quite right there, is it?
Maybe pop it in the chat, Stephen, if you've got sound issues. But we might flick over to UET. It's the same questions, but it's really, along with those questions, and we've got a lot of UET people in the room, I can see, quite a few of you I know. Along with those, like, what are you, if we focus down on delivery, like from the RDO perspective, happy to hear from industry too around emerging all those questions there. But what are your pain points with the qual? What would you like to see improved? What's the potential for any changes, additions, removing stuff that might be a bit obsolete? Happy to open that up for. And I know you transmission distribution people aren't going to stay quiet, surely.
No, we're not. Sorry, we can do, but yeah.
Hey, Broughton.
No, so hi, it's Ben Williams here from Transgrid, and I think we've got Mitch who introduced himself before, and we're pretty keen. I don't want to speak for Mitch because this is his sort of subject matter expertise, but we're quite keen to sort of engage some of the units because they sort of appear to be written for distribution and leaving some of the transmission nomenclature and characteristics out of them. So Mitch, if you're there, I don't know if you want to quickly jump in and for 30 seconds and give more of a brief about what we would be interested in seeing around the training package updates.
See Broughton's there. I can't see him.
Mitch was it?
Here he is.
Yes. Mitch, here he is.
Yeah, sorry guys, I was just having some
technical stuff.
Audio
You're gonna love it.
I think we're all good now, are we?
Yeah, it sounds much better, mate.
Cool. There's a couple of just initial things I had were probably around the UEE units. There's a UEE CD 0051, use drawings, diagrams, schedules, standard codes. Looking at that, it's very, I guess, domestic electrician based. It's really talks about coordination between different trades when building
construction
a house.
Sites, etc.
Yeah. So the initial query was with that one was, is there an equivalent kind of drawings unit that we could pick from another qual or somewhere that would potentially be more relevant to transmission line workers? Yeah, this is specifically with the transmission cert 3.
So happy to take that one on, Mitch, first off, and then you can let us know what else concerns you. So that CD51 unit as part of the UEE review, we did identify very much electrician based, yet even in the UEE, but also UET, it's been used broadly. It was used in electronics, etc. And you're going, what do electronics people need to know about where a consumer main's going to run, point of attachment, all that stuff. So we have actually broadened that unit out, and the electrician qual to meet the essential performance capabilities is actually going to have a different unit in it. And then that CD51 has become a broader UEE-based, electro-technology-based unit. We have showed that to the working group, the tech committee for the very remote project, and also the cross-discipline one to have a look at. And then the decision would be around, with that new version of the unit, is that now suitable for UET, or do we need to develop something for UET specific? This general early consensus is now it's broader and more open to contextualization, that it could work in the UET, but that'll be a discussion going forward as part of that project. And once we actually have that unit finalised, we've sort of got a final version to a point, but it hasn't gone out for any public consultation or whatever yet. But we have also identified as part of that group that rather than importing CD19, the assembly disassembly, we're looking at, and I'm currently drafting that for the cross group at the moment, a tools workshop type unit to do with ESI, and then a decision can be made that they might see that and go, look, 19 is still fine, or no, this is a better option to go with. So we do have, and it was a great starting point, because I think it's just been accepted in the past that, if there's a unit close enough, we just import it and we use that. And that CD51's a great example, because it's not even really close enough to a unit that suits someone doing an underground distribution or a transmission type, any of those, where you're talking about construction sites and really domestic sparky stuff. So we've tried to broaden it out, so hopefully it will fit into UET as well. It certainly fits better in our other UEE Cert 3 quals that tend to pick that one up. But it will be open to have a look at whether it actually suits in here and any of those UEE imported units. I think, sorry, Joe, hogging the microphone. There's been a bit of general consensus around the DC unit that electrical principles are electric principles, so that probably does sit happily to still import. But yeah, any of the others we can have a look at as part of this project, and certainly will be. Joe?
Yeah, I was just going to call out the with 19 in particular, and I'm sure there's others, not just the suitability of it as a freestanding unit, but the implications of that unit as it is at the moment in the prerequisite chain as you move on and up into other qualifications.
Yep. And it'll go to you, Broughton, but the prereq chains we're definitely looking at too, to stop that restrictiveness of, if they're a prereq unit, they've got to actually contribute underpinning knowledge towards the unit that they're a prereq for, not just because that's the way it's always been and that's a delivery sequence. The TPOF specifically calls out that they can't be used for delivery sequence. So that's, and UEE particularly is bad for prereqs. UET is not much better. And it is a focus of the assurance body. They've already spoken to us about it, but it needs to be addressed. Broughton?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. The only other there was a few things that I wanted to mention, and Mitch, jump in if you don't agree with me. I guess the level of complexity around a lot of those other UEE courses are, solve problems in multipath circuits, that sort of thing. We find and this is our organisation, it's very complex for transmission lines, which is not needing that level of understanding of how multipath circuits work when we're talking 3 massive transmission line, phases. And we do find a lot of them struggle with that, especially with trying to understand how that relates to their work. I'm just wondering if that's, it's been brought in from a distro point of view where they need to do phase outs to a location or whatever and that sort of thing, whereas our transmission lines people, they just need to know red phase, blue phase, white phase.
Yep. Just on that DC too, part of that review, we've gone back to the future a bit, and there won't be, well, at the moment there's about 5 different variations of that unit, but there is single and multipath as separate. There, at Cert 3 level, there's just one unit as part of that review that we've got drafted at the moment that just combines back into, if we're going back to the future, the old E104, people might remember, similar along the lines of that. And we've also looked at some of the complexities about, need to know basis, complex formulas, etc. Do they need to know that? So be interested on your thoughts when those drafts become available, whether they sit more suitable for your workers.
Yeah, excellent. Yep. Looking forward to looking at it. Mitch, probably another question for you. I do wonder from a gaps point of view, and just from me, I guess looking at it from a high level, do we think there is a gap around tension loading and that sort of like stringing and the actual loading of towers and that sort of stuff? Because I do find it's very electrical based, and I'm wondering if there is gaps. What other gaps can you see, Mitch, especially from a Cert 3?
I mean, we're still, as part of the RTO, UET RTO units, we cover conductor calculations as far as tensions and whatnot. I know in our delivery anyway. Yeah, there could be a slight gap there, but I guess the question is there other units around that have that stuff included with them already, or would that be a development of new or a redesign?
Yep. And I mean, this is, for a few of you, this is sort of your first time to think about this, I guess, that now we've confirmed that these projects are up and running. So happy to, and Rach might pop in the chat, the training at PSO. If you've got any inquiries or thoughts, happy for you to send them through there as well to us. Warren, you had your hand up.
Yes, yes, Brett. Just saying before about the broad-based units across a number of areas. I'm not actually sure whether the UET uses the drawing subject, the 51 at the moment, and it's being revised, but it's also being changed to being more around electrical mechanic focus, with it actually having schedules on how to wiring houses, which would be totally inappropriate in this training package and in several others. So maybe that needs to be looked at as well if you are using it.
Yeah, so it is currently in UET, but that's the one we were talking about earlier that's been reviewed and has been more broadly contextualised for use across various. It's not in the electrician qual anymore. They're having their own one to deal with the stuff that needed to be in there. And then that 51 has been broadened out, and we'll make that available pretty early in this project because it'll be sort of finalised from a UEE point of view. And like I said, those groups that are working at the moment around the remote space and the cross units from that do have access to that current version of that unit. So we'll get some feedback from them.
I just had one other query, if I could, around the UET and the transmission specifically. I guess working at heights would not be in there as a core. And we've got license to operate an elevated work platform as a core unit. Working at heights, I believe, should probably be in there as well. A lot of our transmission line workers are climbing as well as AWPs.
Yeah, that's a great point, I think. Absolutely. And look, I'm only just starting because I've been up to my ears in UEE stuff at the moment. Just starting to actually look a bit deeper into some of the quals that I haven't looked at before in that space, and transmission would be one that we haven't had a great deal of focus on yet as part of PSO. But that's a great call out. I mean, if you've got AWP in there, it makes sense to have working at heights for sure. So there's certainly the sort of things we'd love to hear along the way. Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up. I tried a couple of times.
You're a chair. You're all right.
I can't follow the rules. That would be another example of like a career start sort of, all of those things I think we spoke of that time in, I think Renard brought it up, you know, like safe work at height, white card, some of the EWP and all of those things that underpin being able to work.
And thank you, Joe, because you've just prompted what I was trying to remember I wanted to talk about as
Oh,
well,
yay.
tied to that remote, very remote project. So that project was actually to review the Cert 3 very remote qual. And I should know the title off by heart, but I don't. But it's about servicing very remote communities, very restricted qual to who can actually do it in what areas. But there was also a UEE Cert 2 qualification about remote, which basically was going to be deleted because it had no enrollments for several years. But we rolled it in with that project, and with discussions with the group, it's been decided that we would, instead of, it'll still be deleted as a UEE qual and significantly changed, but we decided that there was really a need for a UET pathways qual, and not just aimed at remote, like as a lead-in. It'd still be a lead-in to that, or a stepping stone into the Cert 3 very remote, but it could also lead into the Cert 3 underground, the Cert 3 overhead and transmission, etc. So for those familiar with the UEE space, the electro-technology career start, something along that lines for the ESI, for the electricity supply industry. So that's where we're looking. My director, Christina's working on that to bring a draft back to the group at our next meeting. She's not online today, but very much a foundation level UET qualification that sort of hasn't existed, and they've use that UEE pathway, but making it more based around that it would lead directly into those line worker type quals, cable joiner, etc., or that very remote, which we're doing the project on. Broughton?
Sorry, I had to step away there for a minute, so you might have already covered this. I did want to note too, one thing I'd love for us to have a look at is that development between the Cert 2 and the Cert 3 transmission. I think that Cert 2 is that transmission construction, because I know it's getting used a lot in the industry. And what we're finding is there's not really much of a alignment with the Cert 3.
It's a good call out.
You would expect it. Yeah. I like how the Cert 2 rolls into the Cert 3 for electro-tech and that career start, but just it doesn't work the same in UET.
Yep. So, yeah, and we are looking at, as part of that remote project, potentially a altogether new UET Cert 2. But I know there is that transmission line construction, which seems to be, just looking from the outside, certainly not an expert, really specific into that's the only spot it'd lead you is into transmission, where we're looking at a more broader one that will lead into any of those Cert 3 UET quals, because there's a lot of focus on skill shortage, etc. And I'm sure if you've been to PSO events before, you hear about the thousands of electricians we need, but we're going to need line workers too. And what we've identified through, particularly around talking to career advisors and even parents and school sort of age students, everyone knows what an electrician is. Most people know what a Friggy is. Do they actually know? And the information we're getting back is a lot of them don't, unless they've got someone directly related through their family, in the PSI. It's not really a pathway that they consider much. And same with the career advisors. And if there's an electrical apprenticeship advertised, there's no shortage of applicants, which is the other thing. It's not a shortage of people wanting to be electricians. It's a shortage of actual apprenticeship opportunities. But could some of those people who are interested in the industry, that don't know this pathway exists and these careers exist, that, so that's, certainly a focus of having that Cert 2 as something that may be able to be delivered as a vet in schools type program.
That sounds really good.
Any other thoughts on
Troy's?
Yeah, Troy, thanks, mate.
Oh, just a quick one. Two comments on that. Here in WA, our training council, we're constantly, so we're dealing with vet coordinators at the education department. Most kids want to be electricians, but we tell them to look at adjacent occupations as well, including ESI and other utilities, because they smaller workforce, but a big space in the rollout of renewables. And the other thing we've accredited a certificate 2 in utilities in WA, which will probably be going up on PGA soon if it's not already. So something we're going to work. We've worked in partnership with Horizon and Western Power and Water Corp here in WA. But yeah, could be useful to other states. Just something to look out for.
Thanks, Troy. Anyone else? I guess the focus has pretty much been on the Cert 3 quals, most of the comments that have come through. What about at higher level, the Cert 4 and diploma? Is there an advanced diploma?
For
Advanced
me,
diploma?
I'd love to look at substation, Cert 4 substation, and I think that and I obviously can't talk technically, but some stuff to align it to large scale. There's I know we have done some work on the qualification as it is with some non-accredited bits that really set people up well to be a large scale utility worker. And so it'd be good to look at what that is and sort of look at building those in some electives into the qual.
Yeah, I just on the same from the subs, it will look at what ends up happening with the UEE. Could also make some minor changes to the Cert 4 subs as well, with where some elective units currently sit in the Cert 3 UEE. If that changes and the Cert 3 electro is just core and no electives, that could change how we could look at the qual and how it's developed as well. I've got a little small one that I'd like to add the low voltage switching into the Cert 4 subs as an elective as well, just as a pathway, because it's in the distribution line worker, and that it's in the Cert 3 electro as an elective, but it's not in the Cert 4 subs.
So
yeah,
and actually,
so there is some minor stuff like that.
and
Yes,
that's keep going, Pete. Sorry.
No, all the diplomas did get taken out of the qual at the last review in 21. So it'd be interesting to have any feedback from that, if there is a gap that people identified, because at the time when we did go through that, people were only really using the advanced diploma, and that's why the streaming of the advanced diploma got put through, which, as far as I've seen, is working okay. We've got systems ops, distribution systems ops going through that. So yeah, it's that feedback that we need to hear and see to where we go with this.
And that advanced diploma is very much, particularly for design and drafting, design and drafting and systems operation. The if you're talking about new entrants, 19 straight away in the prerequisite chain becomes a little bit of a. So we've already talked about that, but it certainly does impact at the advanced diploma level in a couple of the streams as far as relevance goes.
Yeah, and it was the same in the UEE space, that a workshop unit is sitting in a diploma, an advanced diploma. It's like, why? So we are certainly addressing that, and we'll be across this project too. And I guess just picking up on what Pete brought up around, that LV switching, and it's not in the Cert 4. They're the little things, and we can address them when we get to the project. But if you have any of those issues that you think of from today forward, pop them through to that. Yeah, pop them through to that training at Powering Skills, because it'll inform our first drafting because the way we'll do it is set up the tech committee, but we'll have some initial drafts to take to them based on what we find through this, the desktop back-end audit where we see stupid prereq change, etc. Ourselves, what Lara's team finds through, its research and talking to industry, and any feedback that we get through our website. There is a spot you can go on the website as well where you, a case for change, I think it's called, but happy to have that training at Powering Skills straight through to there. That comes through to the training package development team, and we've basically got a register that we'll start putting those issues into, so that they'll inform those first drafts that we then take to the technical committee.
Brett, so I'm assuming, like, has PSO been keeping, when you're working inside the units of competence, inside the training packages, and there's the strange little things that get through that are perhaps not quite written correctly, or they're a typo, or do you know what I mean? Just those little more administrative things that have been called out. Have you already got records of when, or do we need to be retelling those?
No, if you've sent through those, and I know Ruth from Oricon, or has already, they should all be on the, in our background. So yeah. But happy for anything else you come across or thoughts you have, like Peter said with that unit before, would seem to me, just on hearing that it would obviously should sit in the Cert 4. And just on picking up on what Pete also said, at the moment we are working on a core-only draft in the electrician qualifications, so no electives. That's still to be totally signed off by the technical committee for that project. But at the moment, we've sort of got technical committee agreement to persist with that, and then they'll look at the whole, when all the units are drafted, how that sits, making sure. But from a regulator point of view, the core would meet the EPCs, so it would meet the licensing requirement. So it'd just be the stakeholders outside of that. Sorry. And Rach has put also how you can do it via our website, case for change as well. So you can either do it as a direct email or via that portal, and it'll end up with the same people. So.
And we've got Stephen with a hand up there.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, thank God for that. Sorry about that. No, my docking station decided to smoke a couple of days ago, and I've got a new one. It doesn't like me, so it's all been disconnected. So, right, okay. Just going back to what I was going to say about the UEE package, I'm actually on that committee. So I know it's all about, a lot of it's about rooftop, but I think that the bigger solar stations should be put into UET package, because you've got 1500 volt DC, you've got 33, and then you've got transmission voltages as well. So that's my thoughts about that. So and sorry about the technical glitch, but anyways,
that's great. That's great, Stephen, and that sort of has been on our radar of whether some of it belongs in UEP or UET if it's the transmission of it, etc. So that's good feedback. It's certainly. I
keep mentioning it all the time to them. And again, I'm also on the Australian Standards Committee, and the voltages the voltage class of 1500 volt DC is classed as low voltage, which IEC have done that, and I don't agree with it at all. It's another problem we've got with that as well. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems in the UET package, like the underground. I do a lot of non-accredited training for underground cable joining and so on like that, and VLF testing and so on. So there's a lot of things I see that the package really needs to be fixed up to neaten things up, because it's at the moment the RTOs are training these guys, and they're going out after 4 days, and they've been subjected to 11 kV joint, and they stuff it up. And also doing the autopsies on them, I can see it a mile away. Right, that's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Stephen. And now remember, we have spoken before, way back, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Yes,
indeed we have.
Dodgy joins with heat shrink and stuff.
Oh, mate. Look, it's only a face a mother loves, so you'd never forget it.
We've changed slide, but it's still the same intent of you know, any ideas, but any, I guess, to do with moving on, but happy to keep going if there's technical things people want to talk about. But if there's anything from the session that stood out to you, is there some stuff you need clarified, you know, and our ways of working forward? If you've got any ideas there, happy to hear at this point, but still happy to have any technical points brought on as well. And we're going to finish a bit early, so we've got plenty of time. So while you have a think about that, we'll get you to just do, it is literally a minute, this survey. If you can scan that on your mobile device, or I'm sure the lovely Rachel will pop a link in the chat before I even finish talking.
I'll even do it.
But happy to keep the discussion going for a bit, and then we can wrap up a bit early if that's where we're at. But
so you haven't looked at any numbers or anything yet with the quals or units at this stage, have you, Brett?
We have done some early enrolment.
Some early one?
Yeah.
Because I'd be interested, like I can see the Cert 3s, I can see the Cert 4 subs. I was interested in the other Cert 4, the power systems, to see intake of sort of that and whether it's moved anywhere.
So that's the
Cert
is that
4
the network systems?
Yeah.
40422. I think I've still got Enceiver up because I was on it before. I'll have a quick look now.
There was some numbers like the 11 quals and a couple of hundred units or so. Is that the numbers you're talking about?
I think Pete's talking enrolment numbers.
Yeah, more about the actual
enrolment numbers, sorry.
Yep. Like you get people are doing the Cert 4 subs, but the other Cert 4.
So, so we I can only speak from, we get people do units from the Cert 4 network systems, but not a lot of people enrolled in the whole Cert 4 network systems.
Yep.
And where Cert 4 subs, people are in that for the whole go.
Yep.
And the advanced diploma, sorry.
Yeah, just the 40422, the network systems. 2025 had 10 enrolments, which is the latest data.
For the whole qual, or does that include just for units?
If they enroll in the qual, whether they complete or not, they'd be there, but they could just cherry pick units out as statement of attainment. So, which we think's happening. We can break down into units and get enrolment, and we have got some of that data sitting in the background because we needed that sort of stuff when we put in the submission to DUA to get the project approved. So we do a whole lot there, and we regularly update that. And Peter Adams, who spoke earlier, his team's also our go-to for that stuff.
Some people use some of those units from the Cert 4 in like post-trade sort of pathways.
Yep. Someone else had their hand up. Did they?
Yeah. Peter? Yep. Can you hear me there?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. I've just been following the powering skills for a little while and watching it. One of my friends from TAFE has moved into the organisation. I'm looking at the numbers of people we're going to need extra in our industries, and where are they going to come from? And the second question is, who's going to train them? Because
there's a couple of $1 million questions there, Peter, and appreciate it. But we have done some work. Was there someone from Powering Skills going to jump in there from either IE, or is Pete Adams still online? We have done a couple of research pieces.
Yeah.
One of them, the vet workforce blueprint, which all the JSCs worked on various versions of that, and it identified exactly what you said, particularly in the training space, that where do they come from. So there was some initiatives from that have been put forward, but yeah, it is it's a recognised problem. We certainly recognise the problem, and we're trying to work with solutions. But it's not it's not easy to
something.
Yeah, Jess.
Sorry, Ben, I'm jumping. Yeah, mate. As you said, we had the vet blueprint project that kicked off and finally wrapped up in last month. We do have something coming. Hopefully, we're able to sort of talk a little bit more about it. It's not. It's still waiting before we can actually fully release it, which is trying to address some of that stuff. But it's something that's happening across a number of JSCs. It's been going for a long time. This same issue across all of the training packages that we're in, as well as pretty much most of the training packages have ebbs and flows in this forever and a day. But it is something that the JSC framework is looking at to address. I can't give you a great deal more than that, but it's certainly pretty high on the radar as a significant challenge around capacity and also capability for the workforce to train the new entrants.
And Peter Adams mentioned before, and he's a brief mention of data centres and a report on that, and that's already been identified. Like data centres at the moment of the new oil and gas boom from 10, 15 years ago, that puts a further drain on that workforce because of the money that can be made. How do your contractors keep their workforce? And then the flow-on effect from that is the poor old training sector, who I'm sure Jo, particularly in this space, in the ESI, I've had some conversations with her occasionally about how much they pay some of their trainers. It's quite astounding to be able to get them, or they just can't get them otherwise.
Well, yeah, I'm retired. I just do part-time TAFE teaching. But I was in the power generation and transmission. I was with the Supply Authority. I did telemetry systems and automated power stations, hydros, and did a lot of work on automated plants, but got rung up on the weekend and asked if I'd help sort out a problem that an old acquaintance has come up with. And there's just nobody around, she couldn't find one person who had experience with PLCs, generation, the commissioning an induction regulator, or induction generator. I think it's an 85 kilowatt one. And so she asked me if I could write a commissioning schedule for her. And other people have been quick. The PLC guy writing the code doesn't understand power generation. There seems to be a complete absence of skilled people who are still working, haven't retired.
That's true.
Yeah, it's just that, she rang me up and just said, "Can you please help?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I will." But I said, "No, it's not. It's not. It's only a simple problem." But she said, "Well, no one else thinks it's simple. So they've got, the people at end. There's got to be some way to encourage people at end of career to go into training organisations and give back a couple of years into the industry."
And it's interesting to bring that up, Peter, because that was part of that workforce blueprint. There was a look at that, the transitioning to retirement type people, who've got a lot to give back to the industry, but it's how do you capture them and make it an appealing option, and should bigger employers, and particularly government employers, etc., give time aside for those people to move into that transition.
That's what I was thinking of. That the bigger employers should say, righto, we know you're going to retire at 65, but for the last 3 years before you retire, we want you to go and train people, or go and work for TAFE or one of these bigger organisations, and as 2 days a week or something, so to get some of that skill set back out into the workforce. And it's not happening. I think the employers are probably flat out trying to get the work done and need all their employees
And they
as
don't
well.
want to let those people go because, as you said, some of them are the highest skilled workers. So yeah, we could, as the Jobs and Skills Council, we can identify the problems and make recommendations. We probably can't.
There's a lot of different
enforce
levers
things. Yeah.
That we might, that the industry might use, and I'll say that I'll talk about the RTO industry, and we've got as Brett said, we've got a role to play in identifying it. We cannot make any horses drink.
Yes, yep. I thought, but it did bring up the subject though, which is that everybody is becoming very specialised, but as a result, there's not many people who are across the whole aspect of a project. Anyway, that's just my bit.
Thanks, Pete. That's good to have you on board. Stephen, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I think that, and I agree with what the gentleman just said, but I think you need to shake up ASQA because they've got very limited resources and they haven't got very many subject matter experts, especially in my field. And I've noticed that because I've got an application in for my RTO and it's taken nearly 5 years. So with all the excuses under the sun. So yeah, I think ASQA needs to play a part in this as well, from a point of view where they need to have more industry experts to identify issues with RTOs and training and so on, and encourage other people to become RTOs who are specifically geared up for that, like I am. I do a lot of non-accredited courses, but yeah, it's and I do some accredited stuff for some RTOs around the place. But yeah, I just find that the ASQA model just doesn't work too well. It's my opinion.
Thanks, Stephen. Is there anyone else before we have a look at? We'll flick to the next one anyway, Rach, the next meeting. So we do have another one of these 21st October. Gareth, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a bit of a comment about getting us older people to train people. Obviously, you've got to have a Cert 4 in training and assessment to train people. These days, like when I originally did mine years ago, it wasn't too bad, but these days it seems quite onerous. And there's a lot of stuff, like higher level stuff, that you might need to teach people coming in off the street. But within industry, if you're teaching somebody who's already got a trade or upskilling them, you don't have to worry too much about their reading and writing skills and numeracy and literacy and all this stuff. Is it possible to tailor something more to industry to make it more attractive for older people who don't want to get hammered with all the fluffy stuff on your Cert 4 to be able to pass on their knowledge?
I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, it is out of our remit, and the TAE is the only qualification that doesn't sit with one of the 10 Jobs and Skills Councils. Actually sits with the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations as the governing body of that qualification. It is being reviewed at the moment, I believe. There's been plenty of input back from the JSCs about it. The standards have changed slightly to allow you to do skill sets, etc., rather than the full qual. And you could also start, if you've started the qual, you can now be involved in the training and assessment. So the standards did become a little bit more flexible in that space. But yeah, the qualification itself doesn't sit under any of the current JSCs, sits under the department. We can provide feedback like any other stakeholder, and there certainly has been plenty over the time since I've been at PSO about the restrictive nature of trying to get trainers in and the barrier of the TAE. But I'll throw to you, Joe, because you deal with people all the time trying to get that, I'm sure.
So, and that's the thing, isn't it? So you do the TAE and yes, it has what content it has and it's a requirement, but there's very little, in my opinion, in that qualification that actually upskills, enhances a person's ability to actually deliver training. And whether or not it's streaming or specializations and there's some core TAE and then you go into the compliance stream, or you go into the delivery stream that upskills you and enables you and helps you be, I don't know, but I think there's definitely a place for the delivery focus as opposed to what is more about the regulatory focus.
Stephen?
That definitely considered a barrier anyway.
Yeah, you're right about that. They have relaxed a little bit of the standards because the TAE 40110 and the 40116, if you've got those, you can still actually train and assess. That's the NER's 2025. It's in that standard. So I've done the 112, and look, I fist and farted about it, but yeah, look, I found it okay to an extent, but it was full of stuff that I didn't need to know. It was more sort of regulatory way towards RTO. So maybe they need to, I don't know, put other courses in it. I don't know, but we're not doing with that. But I just thought I'd let everybody know that the 110 and the 116, you can, if you've got those quals, you can still train and assess.
Yep. So from what I've heard, it is being reviewed, that qual. So I'm assuming there will be a public and government consultation period at some point. When we become aware of that, we'll certainly advertise that out to stakeholders because, from a personal perspective, I find it's heavily about compliance and having employed numerous trainers as a team leader at an RDO. It doesn't teach anyone anything about actual how to teach or how to train or tips on training, etc. So compliance is important, but whether that whole qual or everyone needs to do that, if you're coming in as a first year trainer, your resources and stuff are provided for you rather than you creating
train a career start.
Yeah. Train a career start. There we go. Sarah?
I was just wondering on the trainer issues we're discussing here, is that feedback going, how's that getting from PSO and these kinds of discussions back through into that review of the TAE that Drew is apparently undertaking? Because I think you're like spot on with what everyone's saying, and as you know yourself, Brett, from your personal experiences, it doesn't actually teach you that classroom management, which is more sort of learnt on the job with the mentors that you're working with on the tools in the actual RTO. And, you know, it's, I've only worked for 2 RTOs, both in Darwin, but it's really important that people understand that and they have that sort of mentoring as well. I think that needs to come through in the feedback that goes back from PSO back to DUA.
Yeah, and it certainly did not as part of that review at the moment, but as part of the Vet Workforce Blueprint, there was highlighted and from majority of JSCs, I think, came up with that same conclusion of questions, which has probably led to this review. But certainly when we're able to give feedback, we will certainly be providing it and also making sure that our stakeholders can, so it's not just coming from us, it's, you know.
And then there's also the whole piece about methods of engagement, isn't there? So if people are moving into semi-retirement, retirement, how actually can they be employed, engaged with to do some work in some capacity without impacting all the other things that you know, in their post-retirement life.
Yeah, because that was also a bit of a change in the standards around the subject matter experts and your ability to have them, you know, so as long as you've got a trainer who's got the TAE, they may not need to necessarily, in this instance, you know, have any expertise in line work, but if you had the correct SME involved in the training, but it's become a bit less complex, but it's certainly, it's a recognised issue that we know about, and you know, we promote as much as we can. Tony?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, I am a workplace trainer and assessor, which is with PTA. So yeah, we in the N&I division, we only solely deal with our actual workplace stuff. Yes, the Cert 4, when I did it, was a lot easier, but I've had about four of my guys now go through the main one, and it is horrendous. They have all eventually got there, but yeah, we only deal as a workplace trainer and assessor. So PTA in that sense is very good. So yeah, if you don't know anything about the job you're doing, you don't train it.
I don't think there'd be any disagreement with that, Tony. All right, have we got any other comments? Happy to close up a bit early. Yes.
Sorry, Brent, just Ben Williams here. You may have covered this before. It was just about the UET information and being sent out under the drafts. I may have missed the time frame or when that's going to be sort of emailed out for a comment.
So there'll be nothing yet, Ben, until we set up a tech committee. So at that next, good prompt for me though, because I mentioned it earlier, but at that next October meeting of this tag, we'll have some more information about how to get involved with the tech committee and the selection process, etc. And that'll be when the drafting for the full UET project comes online. There may be some early drafts that we can make available through that cross UET group that's working on some of those foundation units that sit in that other remote project, and also the remote units themselves. But there's probably not a lot of people outside of the ones who deliver in that space really too interested in that qual, but there is some crossover units, which is why we've developed that, set up that working group for the crossover. So when we have them at some sort of agreement state with that group, we can certainly do some initial, which won't be the official government public consultation, but get them out to some of our key stakeholders, who you people in this meeting today are all part of that. So that would be an aim with that group. So maybe towards the end of the year, early next year, for some drafts available. But we'll have more information at that 21 October, and that'll be available via our website too. So if you have attended tags and you can't make that one, we send out like emails to have any updates of significance. So you'd get that through that forum as well.
No, that's great. Thanks, Brett, for that information. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries, Ben, and thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Joe and Peter, who do some work beyond the scenes as well as chairing these meetings with us. So if there is no further questions, we'll close out about half an hour early.
All good.
Looks like it's all good. Thanks very much for everyone who attended.
Everyone.
Look forward to seeing you in the near future.
We've got a
couple late questions. Doug?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Just a comment, mate. Just on the we were discussing a bit earlier, just the Cert 2 pathways into ESI, UET. I believe that's got a lot of merit. I think, the pathways into, I know someone spoke about the UEE foundation units that sort of form that. I think a Cert 2 qual would assist in boosting the technical population, I guess, and reducing that I guess, overall need for employee numbers, because getting them into that UET qual since the supply authorities sort of wound back their apprenticeships 10, 15 years ago, it is difficult for contractors and ASPs out there in the market. And if they did have that opportunity to upskill them in a Cert 2 capacity, for a few years, they can sort of drag around behind those Cert 3 qualified people. I think it's a much better pathway. I think we get much better quality tradesmen at the back end of it. And I just want to say I fully support it.
That's great. Good feedback, Doug. Thank you. And Stephen?
Are you guys going to send through a link for the next meetings? Because I've only got one link whereas the UEE, I've got them for the next 12 months.
Yeah,
invite.
we will definitely for this next tag. That'll go out soon.
Right, okay, cool. Because I haven't got it. That's all.
Yeah, and then with that project sort of kicking off, we'll look at what we do, because we are, depending on where the technical committee ends up, who's on it, etc. We do get concerned about stakeholder fatigue. So with the UEE, we went for a bit of a different approach and stopped having the tags and just have a sort of a town hall where we update people on the project itself. Yeah,
that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah. So we'll probably do something similar in this space, but we're not totally locked into that yet.
All right, cool. All right, adios.
All right, cheers all. We'll wrap that up. Thanks again. Thanks, Joe and Peter, for chairing and doing the work you do with us. And hopefully see most of you all soon, or communicate, send through any feedback, etc. We welcome whatever, good, bad, or otherwise. Thanks
Love
all.
the feedback. Thank you. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
See ya.